Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored to have Major General Edward Dorman as our closing speaker and our keynote for this afternoon. The last panel was amazing. I know that those of you who were here for it took it a lot from that. And to continue the conversation, Major General Dorman.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so very much for the nice, warm introduction. And yes, I'm not General Minahan, but I will say that you need to get out there and scour your hatchets and sharpen your bayonets and put 3 rounds on target. That's for all of you, industry partners included, whatever your target is, because it is a different world now. So thanks very much for having me. It's an honor to be with you. So good afternoon, I suppose, already, almost. Good morning. Distinguished guests, general officers, colleagues, and friends, I really want to extend my heartfelt thanks to the organizers of this symposium for your tireless efforts in bringing us together, right? This is a consistent venue every year. It's preceded by intellectual thinking, written articles, and an ability to drive us to come here and have a great, robust intellectual knife fight, if you will, which I think is good, so that we can engage in insightful contributions and think about the way ahead. But I think while thinking is necessary, we also now have to start really doing execution, and we've heard that a lot. Many thanks to the Association of Marine Corps Logisticians, especially AMCL President, Colonel Retired Spanenberg. Appreciate it, Kurt. Very much appreciate that. The VP for Ops, Dr. Josh Gregory, VP of Comms, Major Danny Tudor, and most especially Mr. Greg Lewis, who invited me, called me up and said, I said, are you sure you got the right number? But it's really an honor to be here with you and to have participated over the past day and a half. I was delayed a little bit with a distribution problem coming out of Florida and Hurricane Debbie. And I think some of the rest of us were as well. So over the past 3 days, you've engaged with an impressive array of speakers, from my good friend ASD, Chris Lohman, who I was fortunate to grow up with, in even though he's a Marine, on the Army staff, and a great Marine and a great Army logistician, and now a great DOD logistician, and just a really phenomenal man and thinker. And the Commandant, 38th Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Retired Berger, and phenomenal panelist, delving into critical themes of competition, crisis, and conflicts, and expeditionary logistics. And I want to highlight expeditionary logistics because it'll be a theme of mine through my closing keynote. And, we've talked about understanding the current state of logistics and the importance of preparing for 21st century challenges, from exploring the role of AI and data in logistics. You've heard insights from top defense leaders and industry experts, and you've also learned about the complexities of maritime mobility, the criticality of building resilient warfighting installations. I think that's really important. We've got to tether ourselves back to them a little bit, because they are going to be projection platforms even forward, right? And they're going to come in all shapes and sizes, but it won't be a return to FOBs, COBs, COSs, calls of the past 20 plus years in the global war on terror. And then lastly, a little bit about strategic importance of energy management. Now, as General Berger rightly emphasized yesterday afternoon, and I firmly believe it's up to us, the sustainers here, right? Not just logisticians, the sustainers, to ensure that the joint force can deploy, redeploy, and sustain itself from the tactical to the strategic level. And to rephrase and harness the essence of Adam Weishaupt's words, it's up to us. No help is coming. And if we don't make the effort, I don't think anyone else will. I don't think we really understand that we're behind. I was watching an Olympic 1,500-meter race the other night, and I think the guy that was leading it didn't understand who was behind him, or else he would have accelerated his pace, because he ended up losing the race. And so if we're truly going to skate to where the puck is going to be, in the words of the great one, Gretzky, and General Berger, the other great one, it's up to us. I think this calls for an end of bureaucratic inertia in operations and acquisitions, how we look at the problem. I think we stand at the threshold of a new era, one that demands a revolutionary logistics fighting stance, It's time for the dawn of the new Chick Parsons, embodying innovation, resilience, and relentless dedication across the dime fill environment, not just the M in the dime fill. So as we transition from theory to practical applications, it's clear that our path forward demands a framework for action to address innovation, collaboration, and an unwavering commitment to excellence in logistics operations. So to me, it all comes back to being truly expeditionary. Now, naval forces, Marine forces know what expeditionary warfare is, but I'm going to touch on it. But what exactly is it? What have we learned, and what must we adjust? Now, I believe, and from all my readings and discussions with folks, resources and operations will be multiple, simultaneous, and global. We'll be doing all phases of all types of operation, and we won't just be doing them in one theater of operations. We talk about this, we talk about expeditionary and being in an expeditionary mindset. And we talk about integrated deterrence, but I think it should actually be interdependent deterrence, vice integrated. My delineation is about interdependence emphasizes mutual reliance and the complexity of relationships between autonomous entities, the services, the joint, the intergovernmental, the interagency, the multinational, the combined, all of those tend to operate, regardless of what we say, as independent entities. So I got to get back to the complexity of relationship between autonomous entities that I just named, while integration focuses on kind of unifying these entities into a more cohesive, collaborative, and streamlined system. But it's the understanding the distinction between these concepts which is crucial for effectively managing defense, diplomatic, and economic, and logistics or sustainment strategies, right? So both integrated but interdependent because they affect one another. So for the next few minutes, I'll attempt to provide some thoughts on this. It's linked to the current buzzword of contested logistics and perhaps a framework of where we must begin to work interdependently vice to action, assess, and potentially reaction necessary changes. That's where I think integrated takes us in actioning, assessing, and potentially reacting. And so necessary changes to reestablish our collective ability to underpin expeditionary operations. Now, as we all know, expeditionary warfare involves deploying military forces to conduct operations in foreign territories, far from home mostly, with the ability to sustain those operations through effective and efficient logistics from strategic to tactical level. This capability has been critical in military strategy throughout history. It's not new. Contested logistics, as we say, will be especially prevalent in theaters where expeditionary forces will conduct operations, be they amphibious or otherwise. And as Dr. Lieutenant Colonel Amos Fox points out in his excellent primer, if you've read it, this isn't a new challenge, but a recurring one in large-scale conflicts. Historical examples are replete, such as the strategic battles for control of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean in World War II. And our most recent example, I would go back in 1982, the 1982 Falklands War, where the British really had to be expeditionary, moved a long way from home, were not necessarily prepared to do so very well, and went through great challenge to get there and carry the day and win the war. And I think these historical precedents, among some others, illustrate the notion of uncontested logistics being a recent anomaly, largely influenced by the unique conditions of post-9/11 conflicts. In his book, Logistics in the Falklands, Major General retired Ken Pravotsky notes the critical role of logistics in sustaining operations over long distances under these harsh conditions where it was very evident to those participating. I think the success of the British campaign was a testament to meticulous planning, adaptability, and the ability to overcome the logistic hurdles that presented themselves. So again, expeditionary warfare profoundly shaped by the factors such as speed, distance, and environment. The ability to rapidly deploy forces across vast distances and operate effectively in that diverse and often hostile terror environment is a hallmark of expeditionary capability, but one that we have atrophied in our ability to carry out. However, in trying to get back to expeditionary and execute to standard or above, there are some significant challenges, and we need to overcome those. Now, technological advancements have transformed the logistics landscape, making it more complex as one of those challenges, and we look at technology almost as if it's a panacea that's going to save us. But again, it's not. It's about the human leveraging that technology or leveraging the capabilities at hand. In the past, the physical act of moving troops and supplies was the primary concern. And today, we must also contend with the transparency of modern battlefields, where long-range precision strikes, rich sensor arrays, and cyber threats can disrupt logistics, ours or our adversaries, at any point along the supply chain. Now, the Transcom commander, General Van Ovost, she has emphasized that sea lift and air refueling are top readiness concerns, and you heard that from the panel prior to ours just now. I think the aging sea lift fleet and the need for continuous modernization of air refueling capabilities highlights the challenges we face in maintaining our expeditionary logistics capability. Ensuring a robust sea lift capacity as well as diversifying bulk fuel distribution and delivery systems are also critical steps in addressing these challenges. So to put it into perspective a little bit, the U.S. currently has fewer than 200 U.S. flag ocean-going vessels with fewer than 5 orders on the shipyards in 2023. The U.S. shipbuilding workforce comprises fewer than about 150,000 workers, with fewer than 12,000 merchant mariners and degrading every day. In stark contrast, the PRC and China boast over 7,000 Chinese flag ocean-going vessels with over 1,700 orders for builds in 2023. So the Chinese shipbuilding workforce includes about 600,000 workers with over 1.7 million seafarers or merchant mariner types. So to truly understand and succeed in expeditionary warfare, the U.S. defense community must shed its hubris and honestly reassess its understanding of expeditionary operations and our ability to conduct them. We have not conducted large-scale expeditionary operations since World War II. As Sun Tzu wisely stated, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. And if you know neither yourself nor your enemy, you will succumb in every battle. I would submit that we don't understand our atrophy as well as we should in being able to project force, and that's not what we have done for the past 20 years. We have projected and sustained. We styled ourselves as being able to do that anywhere, anytime, any climb, any place, and sustain it indefinitely. But again, to really conduct expeditionary operations at the scale and speed required by organic units or partnering with industry, with the stevedores who really know how to do this, we're not that good. So we need to think about that. In the evolving landscape, I would call it, of so-called contested logistics, it's crucial for our community to transition towards what I call a self-transforming mindset. Now, this is a concept that was developed by 2 psychologists, Robert Keegan and Lisa Lahey. Keegan and Lahey identify 3 types of mindsets. The first is the socialized mind, which conforms to external expectations, where I believe we are now. And I think I heard General Berger even reiterate that yesterday, but I won't quote him on that. Change is required, and we must lead it. The second one is the self-authoring mind, which creates its own internal framework of beliefs. Oh, well, my boss may not like that, or there goes the next promotion, or there goes the quarterly earning. And then if we can get to the third stage, I guess, which is self-actualization, would probably be the self-transforming mind, which is characterized by the ability to hold multiple perspectives, continuous learning, and openness to real change, a kind of damn the torpedoes while critically thinking about risk and what I've observed. This advanced mindset is essential to navigating the complexities and ambiguities of the modern political, military, operational environment. I think something else that General Berger did well yesterday, as he always does, was speaking about fear of failure, which reminds me of something it's a vignette about my grandpa. He used to say to me, everybody's worried about something, and too often it's, hey, my fitness rep, it's my quarterly earnings, it's am I going to get in trouble? All those things on the line, sometimes tend to fear that failure, right? But he said, hey, he often talked about something called good failure, acknowledging its controversial nature. And he would tell me, hey, knucklehead, it's what you learn after you know it all that's most important. He told me that a lot. So I took that to heart. And I think this philosophy kind of promotes an agile mindset and an agile organizational culture, because it's critical if we're going to cope with constant change. And that's what we do in our element of power, right? We are always dealing with change. It's that VUCA environment that we all know. And if you fail to react quickly, it's more dangerous than making mistakes if you learn from experience and apply appropriately. Success in any endeavor comes from iteration. We talked about that yesterday. Repeated cycles of iteration, innovation, experimentation, testing, and improvement. So the components of this good failure include fail fast. The quicker we fail, the faster we learn and can develop new solutions. Fail often. Each failure produces new knowledge, opening new doors to new solutions. The more we fail, the more we learn, and fail better. Each failure should be thoroughly analyzed and to understand its cause. With that knowledge, each iteration is closer to the best decision. So don't let fear of failure hold us back. Often the consequences of a poor result are much less harmful than they appear in our minds. Those who attempt to shame or embarrass us about failure often have less experience or opportunity than we have. They have no more consequence to us than a stranger on the street. So when we're feeling overwhelmed, let's use our logic to gain a new perspective. No one is perfect and nothing is forever. And remember, as my grandfather said, it's what you learn after you know it all that's most important. So by embracing diverse viewpoints, fostering innovative solutions, and remaining agile in the face of unforeseen challenges, we can ensure our logistics capabilities remain at the forefront of strategic advantage. Kind of what General Berger talked about, turning it on its head, where the logistician or the sustainers are driving optimal op plans and con plans from the J5s of the world for commander's approval, which then set the conditions for the J3s to issue op orders for operations and campaigning. I think that's important. Cultivating environments that promote open dialogue, investing in continuous education, and actively seeking new ideas and technologies will enhance our operational effectiveness and prepare us to lead and innovate in the future. But we must also think more strategically and I would say pluralistically, incorporating diverse perspectives and fostering critical thinking skills. Now, I was reading an article recently on a war game that they had in Norway, and they had some professors from all around the world come in, and this Professor Shields, Patricia Shields out of Texas, she emphasized the importance of expeditionary mindset defined by the critical thinking skills and mental orientations needed to succeed in expeditionary environment. She advocated for a classical pragmatism through 4 tenets: practicality, pluralistic view, participatory, and provisional, or the 4 Ps as she called it. These tenets, as I studied them, I think provide direction for how our mindset should operate in a given context. We must be able to address practical problems using critical thinking, incorporating diverse views, to include those of our allies and partners who exist. Often we're operating in their territory. I would submit that just because they don't speak English doesn't mean they're not smarter than we are. And often because they operate in that environment, they know it way better than we will ever know it. And as a result, we should take their input and maybe sometimes look at how they're doing things, and maybe we're just getting a little more juice out of the squeeze of the way we want to do it if we incorporate ourselves right. So again, it's about incorporating those diverse views across our individual DoD departments via our combined interagency, intergovernmental, multinational partners in a pluralistic, joint and interdependent perspective, engaged in cooperative efforts participatively with improved authorities and policy, and a willingness to share information, truly share information to the point that it hurts, for common purpose to enable us to remain flexible and adaptable to complex situations provisionally. So the transformation from a conventional to an expeditionary mindset, and regardless of how expeditionary we think we are, we've been in a conventional and rotational and transactional mindset, my opinion, the last 20 plus years. So by moving into this truly expeditionary mindset, it'll fundamentally alter the understanding and manifestation of military core values within our organizational constructs. More importantly, I think the change lies in values that guide decision-making, developing critical optimism and the belief that specific conditions can always be improved. It's essential for expeditionary forces, enabling individuals to approach tasks dogmatically. And although this is predominantly a maritime force symposium, I am glad to see that there were some Army folks here and there were some Air Force folks here. I didn't see any space cadets here, but I know they were probably with us. So we had one, and so that's great. And we had great civilians in industry, so that's great. So again, while it's a maritime force symposium and you guys are grounded and schooled and grow up in the maritime place, I think that's great that you adopted this pluralistic approach that I was talking about, ensuring Army logisticians are present, to include me. It's incredibly important because our U.S. Army, and I will tell you this, is no longer capable of conducting true expeditionary operations. We are just not. To the Army today, boarding a commercially contracted craft, right, that's our surge capability, contract airline for a flight to Kuwait and the massive infrastructure and green beans coffee, that is expeditionary to Army soldiers. That's what they think about, right? They don't have to fool with their equipment. In fact, they don't really understand how to do deployment. That's been outsourced. It's something we've got to return to. So the Army remains dependent on others to get to any conflict, often relying on existing infrastructure and external support. It now states that the division is our unit of action, and I find that strange because we can absolutely not deploy a division in a timely manner if required. I was a part of the Army when we could do 10 divisions in 10 days to Europe under what was called Reforger, Return of Forces to Germany. We don't have that skill anymore. So this dependency raises questions about our readiness and our ability to operate in truly remote and austere environments. So deploying to a location with established amenities is not true expeditionary operations. We must challenge ourselves to think beyond this limited view and prepare for the realities of modern warfare. While we are beginning to strike agreements with allies and partners like Japan and Korea and increase those agreements and increase those bilateral agreements and trilateral agreements, it's improving and giving us more extant capability and capacity, and so that's good. But the importance of intra-theater, okay, we've got to get to the strategic port, and then we have to connect and have distribution platforms to work interior lines, right? I would say that shipbuilding and our capability, which is lacking as well, is primarily focused right now on large ships. So there's absolutely a critical need to think about littoral connectors and distribution platforms. And there is a lot of that going on. There is thinking about that. There is possible leasing going on, but it's insufficient in scope and scale, and so it really needs to be addressed. Tactical resupply, maneuver, delivery, and resupply, like Army watercraft, which we divested, and other capabilities. Now, as I listened to a recent War on the Rocks podcast that I talked about, Senator Kelly and Congressman Waltz talked about congressional recommendations for a maritime program and a strategy, right? And they talked about predominantly from that large-scale shipping, not the littoral connectors that we're going to need, right? They talked about Jones Act vessels that we have that go run to Puerto Rico or run to oil rigs and intercoastal waterway and so forth, and said, hey, if we need to, we could pull those. But that would stop economy, right? We can't afford to do that. Where are those same connectors that are out there in the Pacific? They exist, but we're going to need some to map them, understand the agile contracting to get that non-used capacity and bring that to bear for us and begin exercising that. Can we exercise it? Buying a one-size-fits-all is not going to work, as is being suggested. Why do the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps need different kinds of littoral watercraft? That's what I hear a lot when I engage on the Hill or I talk to others. There is not a one-size-fits-all, and we gotta think about that. Our strategic leadership often suggests that we should all be buying the same platforms because it creates commonality, which is a commendable goal, and they should be interdependent, but they sometimes misinterpret the true requirement, such as equating the littoral maneuver vessel heavy with an LSV or an MSV heavy when it is more akin to landing craft utility. Again, our Army strategic leaders need to understand the differences between relocating to infrastructure and operating where none exists, either because it doesn't exist or it's been so damaged it's of little use. I highlight the recent Gaza conflict and its impact on lots operations. I think that's illustrative of the challenge that we face and some of our hubris in saying what we could do when we couldn't. I think back to Desert Storm, where Transcom had to lease over 125 ships from different countries. We even asked the Russians. They turned us down. I don't think it would be much different now. Now, with pre-positioned LMSRs with equipment, because we've talked about that this week, Pre-PO LMSR, the Army just recently made a decision to download their LMSRs and download their pre-position in a cost-saving measure, and then they informed the Joint Staff. I think it's supposed to work differently than that. But so equipment's in place, but the lack of ships to get it connected and task organized, and the actual MRO capacity that's going to be put forward in the regional sustainment, is that all connected and mapped in the way that it should? And then are we training with our partners and allies on their equipment? Mobility Guardian was a great example where they pushed it from CONUS out into the Pacific, exercised it, and then sometimes had to use partner nation equipment, but they had to get trained and certified on it in order to use that. So that's a good initiative. As we advance, it's crucial to integrate technological advancements because technology is advancing and address environmental challenges. Leveraging data analytics, autonomous technology, and alternative fuels will enhance our operational reach and ensure freedom of action. But the policies must prioritize the funding and support for these technologies, the training programs that go along with them, and focus on building self-contained capabilities and reducing logistics pipelines to mitigate the vulnerabilities we've talked about. In summary, understanding and evolving our mindset towards expeditionary warfare involves shedding our hubris, embracing some strategic and pluralistic thinking, and addressing the practical and environmental challenges we face. This comprehensive approach will ensure our readiness and effectiveness in modern expeditionary operations. Now, I think it's also important to learn from our past, but that's not going to tell us everything. Recent conflicts have underscored the importance of logistics in achieving operational success. For instance, Ukraine's strategic disruption of Russian supply lines during the winter of 23 to 24 highlighted the psychological impact and effectiveness of targeting logistics. Again, this stresses General Berger's point yesterday of going after enemy logistics for a purpose, right? We must be the subject matter experts, and we must do it beyond the tactical level. We start at the tactical level, but we also ratchet it up to the strategic level. We can become the experts, but then we must translate that knowledge and drive action across the dime fill to complement our efforts and ensure we're harmonized in order to have the effects that we need to have, which is create dilemmas for our enemy, leverage every capability to have vulnerability for them. By stranding Russian soldiers with inadequate provisions and striking their supporting tactical to strategic logistics positions, the Ukraine leveraged logistics to demoralize and weaken the enemy. Again, adapting logistics, tactics, techniques, and procedures to specific environments is vital. Understanding the operational environment, you know this, whether it's urban, jungle, desert, or Arctic, allows for more effective and efficient logistical support. This adaptability is essential for maintaining a high level of readiness and ensuring mission success. Reducing logistical tails, dispersing supplies, and maintaining mobility are crucial. Now, adversaries can contest logistics lines. We know that. They are working every day. It's not a competition, I think. It's an outright conflict, creating vulnerabilities that have to be mitigated. An example is the use of unmanned aerial systems in the Nagorno-Karabakh war, if you're familiar with that, between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I had a chance to be there in March. It was very interesting. The Armenians kind of thought, hey, we fought this battle before. We know what we have to do. We just have to resummon ourselves and take to them like we did the last time. But the Azerbaijanis were thinking a little bit differently. They had loitering drones from Israel and Turkey. They had precision fires. They had a number of other things, as well as cyber usage, which kind of brought the Armenians to their knees. And it was devastating. And they're still not thinking about it from a, hey, how do I integrate the entire nation into the sustainment function? So again, got to really think about it. We got to think about the denial of access to critical logistics nodes, such as Suez or key ports, exemplifying the strategic challenges we face. Now, we talked a lot about technology over the past couple of days, and technology like artificial intelligence, machine learning, sensors, data mesh networks, Internet of Things, and big data analytics, they are revolutionizing logistics. I think AI can optimize demand forecasting and route planning, while Internet of Things can enhance supply chain visibility so that we really have total asset visibility through real-time tracking and condition monitoring. These advancements improve efficiency and resilience in logistics, but are not a panacea. The use of drones for resupply, advanced power solutions to reduce logistical footprints, and demand reduction through innovative practices are just a few examples of how technology can help us. But again, we've constantly got to be thinking about context and appropriate use. Policy. We talked about policy. What are the policies? If we're going to fully leverage technologies and new concepts, policies must prioritize funding and authorities and change business processes to support their integration. And then we have to train everyone so they are aware of it and enable it so that it's successful. That takes a lot of work. Building self-contained capabilities and reducing dependency on vulnerable supply lines will be essential steps in strengthening our logistics framework. And that's just some of how we can do that. Naturally, we've got to continue to bang the drum about sequestration and continuing resolutions and funding delays that hinder modernization efforts, highlighting the need for sustained continuous investment in both infrastructure and technological advancements. And it must evolve and run at scale and speed. As I said before today, if you cannot produce at scale and speed, you're not modernizing at all. You're just managing, and poorly, I might add. Strategic resilience and resiliency involves political, economic, social, and security stability. So we have to develop a multi-layered approach that leverages regional sustainment and partnerships with allies, which ensures a more robust and flexible logistical network with fewer vulnerabilities. We must enhance the strategic stockpile, not just of parts, but of things like strategic and critical minerals. They're not the same as rare earth elements. There are some overlap, but we really got to have the minerals in order to have the advanced manufacturing. You can't have one without the other. So you got to think about that. And that is where relationships based on trust come into play. Activities like the Army National Guard State Partnership Program can build that trust and help ensure relational resilience. At the end of the day, it's always about personal relationships and trust. Now, many of you probably haven't heard the story about the tourist on holiday in the Himalayas who got a rare opportunity to visit a little-known monastery there. It was an engineering marvel, this monastery, on top of a steep mountain. And the only way you could get to it was to be pulled up the side of the mountain, a 200-meter cliff, by a rope. And so as the tourist looked on, he noticed the rope was fraying a bit. And so he asked the monk sitting there next to him, who was the G4, the logistician, he said, how often do you guys replace the rope? And the monk said, every time it breaks. Now, that kind of logic doesn't work for most of us, as I hear the chuckles. It certainly does not instill trust. We now live in a time where there's simply too much at stake to wait for the rope to break, particularly when the rope represents the complex and critical challenges we face locally, regionally, and globally to the rules-based order, but more importantly, to the globally hyper-connected, complex supply chain, which is the foundation of deterrence, as we've heard, right? Which enables us to have the ability to deny or punish and distribute capability to a point and place in time where we can do that. So we must transition from a World War II era production model to the modern, agile, and global framework, emphasizing regional sustainment and leveraging the capabilities of allies and partners, which will enhance our operational readiness and efficiency. I think the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act's provisions, such as preventing the use of Chinese logistical systems and supporting multi-year contracting for industrial base stability, reflects this shift, but we must do more. I do think that we have to do some increased training and educational programs. We train for certainty, we educate for uncertainty. Great comments yesterday by General Berger on programs like JAWS and SAMS and TWI and others. I think those are great to developing the strategic thinking we're talking about, especially about this supply chain environment, right, that affects both us and our adversaries. Integrating these programs with State Department initiatives and others, economic initiatives and financial initiatives can enhance our global understanding and capabilities. Again, understanding the global economy, the finance and supply chains is essential, not just for the State Department folks or economic folks, but industry and for the military leaders at all echelons, so we can engage and translate what we are seeing, where we are, and how we can affect it positively or negatively to gain a competitive advantage. So educational policies focusing on developing personnel capable of navigating this complex global environment and making informed strategic decisions is essential. The use of AI should complement but not replace the human in understanding the nuanced political, economic, and operational and sustainment characteristics in which we find ourselves. So, revisiting some key questions. Throughout this forum, we have addressed many critical questions. What exactly is expeditionary warfare? What's the spectrum of possibilities we face? How do speed, distance, and environment and distribution capability affect expeditionary warfare and our fighting stance? And how does this impact logistics training and readiness, or the sustainment warfighting function I think we need to begin to think about? We've got to think strategically. There are still some gaps requiring further exploration. What has been our experience in expeditionary warfare, and how can we improve? Where do we need to improve? What shortfalls should we be concerned about now? How will this help us, how will this forum today help us refocus our efforts? And how are we going to come away from here with some outputs to drive some inputs so that we come back here next year and we've addressed some things and we're not talking about the same things again? So we got to drive home the answers. Now, when I worked for General Mattis, people used to say, "What keeps you up at night?" And you say, "Nothing keeps me up at night. I keep other people up at night." And I loved that because he did. And so we need to think and act like that, right? We've got to drive it. We've got to address the questions. We've got to emphasize continuous learning and adaptation. We have to lead up the chain of command all the way through the legislative and the executive, right? We've got to draw closer to industry. We've got to be less afraid of regulations, and we've got to know them so that we can navigate them deftly. We got to leverage lessons from recent conflicts. We've got to integrate new technologies. We've got to foster strategic and expeditionary thinking. This is what will enable us to overcome current and future challenges and accelerate our pace. So in conclusion, there's a call to action. Understanding and evolving our mindset towards true expeditionary warfare involves shedding hubris, embracing strategic and pluralistic thinking, and addressing the practical environmental challenges we face. We must become the absolute experts in our own and our adversaries' logistics ecosystems. We must know things like Chinese have no underway maintenance capability. They cannot do that. And they just can't. That's something we can attack. They have a different chain of command for peacetime operations than they do for wartime operations. We must understand that. We must be able to understand when those transitions will happen, and we must be there to engage, and we must be there to create a dilemma in that logistics ecosystem. And that comes via an all-inclusive education and training for us as sustainers to understand and exploit enemy logistical vulnerabilities, to create a position of comparative advantage. This comprehensive approach will ensure our readiness and effectiveness in modern expeditionary operations. And the United States does not have the strategic initiative in the present conflict, in my personal opinion. It is reacting to choices made by others, which its analysts may not anticipate and understand. The U.S. and allied planners can hope for the best and plan for the worst. The silver lining is that we have the best sustainers, we have the best people, we have the best mind, and we have a lot of good initiatives going. But I challenge us to work harder to ensure they are all knitted together correctly and sequenced so that they produce outcomes versus activity. I see a lot of activity, right? My grandpa used to tell me that too. Do not mistake activity for achievement. And he told me that a hell of a lot. So we've got to think like that too. Under the category of best, there are two families of relatively benign expectations which are not necessarily consistent, I believe. One is that America's adversaries think they are already doing pretty well. They find current trends satisfactory, and they will watch us as Ukrainian resistance ebbs and fractures, and as the West grows tired and quarrels, and as Israel tears itself apart. Meanwhile, they will keep building their strength. To be more precisely precise, China, as our government has now explained, while not providing formal munitions, has made a comprehensive decision, I believe, coming out of the winter of 2022 for the Russians, right? And they have completely rebuilt the Russian military, mostly in supply chain activities. That should concern us, because if they're making our other adversaries' supply chains better, they're beginning to outpace us. And meanwhile, we need to look at some of our own policies and bills in which there is language, I suppose, that would limit us in a way that we haven't really given proper critical thought and analysis. And so we may think that the Chinese are not looking at what's going on at other places in the world, but they most assuredly are. Despite U.S. warnings not to do certain things, they continue to do them. Imagine, they're kind of like teenagers with parents. And then we think about the North Koreans and the Iranians, and I would encourage us all to look at them as separate vectors, not as tied together. Now, they'll work as in similar ways. They're not the axis of World War II. They're not the axis of evil, but they are working more closely, and they're doing some things in the supply chain environment that should concern us. And then, as a recent article I read by Phil Zelikow articulated, the problems we face today are fundamentally different and more troubling than those of previous eras. Simply rearming is not a sufficient answer. I believe we have to innovate and adapt our sustainment capabilities to meet these challenges head on. This involves recognizing that our adversaries are building up capabilities to deter us, which we know, and creating scenarios where the burden of escalation falls on us, not them. So assessing the anti-American coalition today, we should consider that the Chinese vision for peaceful coexistence, reminiscent of not what they want us to think, but more like what Khrushchev's vision was in the late 1950s, which was a prelude to heightened confrontation, which I think today is not contestation, but really conflict. We're being conflicted. We're at war. So the legacy of American success in past global confrontations can encourage wishful thinking now. That's where I talk about shedding the hubris. America's circumstances and capabilities are different today, and we face the danger of simultaneous conflicts worldwide. For example, the situation with Taiwan places the burden on America to escalate in this crisis. Calls for a general American rearmament and power projection are unlikely to be able to be enacted soon enough to address these immediate risks. U.S. and allied leaders must focus on coping with available forces and developing practical plans to avoid a traumatic defeat, with some potentially painful trade-offs. Therefore, we must integrate more closely with industry to achieve this hyper-integrated knowledge base that allows us to outpace and outmaneuver our adversaries in the new maneuver space, which I believe is the global supply chain environment. In closing, I challenge each of you and all of us to think beyond the traditional concepts of expeditionary warfare. Let us prepare for the realities of modern warfare, where adaptability, resilience, and strategic thinking are paramount. Together, we can ensure that our forces are ready to face any challenge, anytime, anywhere. Remember, it's up to us. No help is coming. If we don't make the effort, no one else will. We stand at the threshold of this new era. So it is time for the dawn of the new Chick Parsons. Please step forward and identify yourself. But I encourage us all to embody that spirit of innovation, resilience, and relentless dedication across the dime-fill environment, not just our M in dime. Thank you all for your dedication and commitment to advancing our collective understanding and capabilities in expeditionary logistics. Thank you for inviting me here. I hope I haven't bored you. Let us move forward with the resolve to innovate, adapt, and excel, ensuring that we are prepared for the challenges ahead. Thank you. God bless America, its partners and allies, and I appreciate everything every one of you do each and every day. Thank you.